Hello, everybody. I am Tyler. You know me as Gregory in our Pokemon D&D campaign, but welcome to our first episode of DM Direction and our other host here.
Hey guys, it's me. You guys know me as Ryan, the DM from our normal Pokemon D&D campaign, and we've even done some, or at least plan to do some more one-shots in the future too for the channel, so I'll be doing some DMing for that also. So, yeah. So what the DM Directions is it's going to be a talk show where we give advice to help enhance your guys' D&D gameplay. And sometimes in episodes we'll discuss topics that we find interesting about D&D as a whole, and just other times we might just focus in on something super specific, whether if it's regular D&D, Pokemon D&D, etc. So the plan for this episode, at least being our first one, is going to be talking about general homebrew improvements for your D&D as a whole. And so we'll be going into details of just general improvements for your regular D&D games, whether it be Pokemon or regular D&D. And then we'll also go into details of discussing specifically on how to improve your Poke D&D experience when you guys are playing, whether if it's you guys are players in a play group and you can suggest these ideas to your DM, or if heck, if you're even a DM and you're planning to start your new game and you're like, where can I find good advice on ways to make it better, then you've come to the right place.
But first, we need to know what homebrew is. And when we say homebrew, we're typical D&D where it's content that players and DMs make up to fit their world, and it's not content that you find in the player handbook or supportive books that Wizards of the Coast releases. And when we talk about it in terms of our Pokemon camp, it's the different Pokemon variants, different races, even the Ormia region as a whole is Ryan's, our DM's homebrew creation. So that's important to keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, so going into your topic one of just homebrew improvements for your D&D games as a whole, a good one that we do, that we've done at least in campaigns, and even if it's one shots, and even when I'm not recording anything and I'm just playing, I have another group that I do a separate campaign with, and these guys love some of these improvements that we've done, and I've been doing this for now a good few years, so I've got some experience on how to make some of these improvements through some testing been pretty well. First thing being, I like the idea of being able to give full health for healing items, such as in normal D&D, there's just the potion of healing, right? And that is just a 2d4 plus 2. So instead of having players roll and potentially waste a turn healing only 4 health from an item that they just got as like maybe a reward from clearing a dungeon, or somebody gave it to them to protect them when they're going out in the fray, I choose to give them the full amount of health. I choose to give them, for that healing item, you heal your 10 points of health, which is your 2d4 plus 2. And by doing that, it makes you feel, okay, if I'm taking time to do this, I at least want this time to be impactful. And yes, D&D, I understand, is supposed to be random with dice and stuff, and that's what makes it kind of fun, but if you want to take the chance of having your players potentially get mad for getting an item that's supposed to help them, then that doesn't seem the most useful of their time, and they might not want to risk it in the future when they're like, I could just have somebody use a healing spell on me instead of healing 2d4 plus 2, but when times are dire, right? Yeah. So, when it comes down to it, same thing for Pokemon, right? Because in the Pokemon D&D 5e handbook as of right now, the item, just the regular potion, also heals the good old 2d4 plus 2. And while that's nice, like I said, even in the games and the video games, regular potion only heals a flat 20. So by having players heal at least that flat 10 of a regular potion, they're at least thinking, okay, I didn't waste my turn of healing 4 health on this Pokemon to then have it take like 6, potential 6 or even 10 later on. I want him to use this healing item to make sure it's getting its full effect.
God forbid it gets a crit,
Yeah, and then
monster's wiped and you're down a potion.
Yeah, for real. And then it's like, okay, I just wasted my turn to do this when I could have maybe used my turn to use withdrawal or some other move to give me a boost in AC. When I thought, oh, if I'm just healing them, I have a shot of healing out of taking range. It's like in the games. if you notice, okay, 2 hits are going to knock out my Pokemon. If I use a potion, heal him up to full, he can hit me, and then I can use a move to respond back, and then I'm in trouble again. So I have that time to
Mixed
set up,
strategy. It
by
makes it
knowing I
easy.
heal 20. Where in this, it's like, okay, I just healed 4. It's like, well, that's
Yeah. Or one. I mean, there really is,
like quick attack in Pokemon D&D is a bonus action. That's a D4. So like the enemy's bonus action could be equivalent to you wasting your full action of healing your mon if you get unlucky on those 2d4s. And it can it could happen. So that's like my opinion as a DM on like what I like to enforce. The whole thing of healing items will restore their full amounts instead of rolling, because that way players feel, okay, I'm taking my time to use this. I want to feel I'm putting my effort, my time into doing something to benefit me or the team further. At least that's my opinion as DM. Ty, as a player, what do you think on that notion of that rule?
I think it's a great rule, especially in terms of normal D&D. When we're talking about it, it makes it so that our party doesn't feel like we have to have a healer, which, if we have all barbarians or all fighters, chances are we're going to be relying on those potions a lot. And if I'm spending my gold, or in Pokemon, if I'm spending my currency on them, I think it makes the benefit of that worth it. And I'm more likely to do it because it's worth it.
Yeah, and to look at the numbers, right? A Pokeball is 250 in the game, in this Pokemon D&D, and a potion is 200. So like, you're kind of saying, okay, instead of me paying an extra 50 to potentially catch another mon for my team, I'm going to buy this potion to hopefully roll lucky on those 2d4s if you don't enforce the full healing thing.
Yeah. And in a fight, I mean, even if you're matched equal to another Pokemon, again, crits. You could run into a situation where you need just 10 more HP and boom, you're good.
Now, to raise the counter argument of that, if it's like, okay, now there are some items in the Pokemon game in Pokemon D&D 5e, like 150 Poke, like the 150 of the Poke currency, right, is
Mhm.
a candy bar, which heals 5 HP. Or the 200 equivalent of a potion is a fresh water, which restores 7 HP. So if you're running on the notion of, well, why would, if my players are healing a 2d4 plus 2 HP, which is 10 for 200, why would they ever spend 200 to only heal 7 on fresh water? And while that's a good point, you could do something else with the fresh water, whether if it's like they need to catch it as like a delivery for another mission and things like that. So don't feel like by doing that you're canceling out other items. And ultimately, if you are the DM listening for ideas, you can make the freshwater heal more. Or if anything, the freshwater, like in the games, is given to them when they go to the gyms, right? If you talk to that guy out front, he gives them the freshwater. That's like giving them yes, it's a weaker potion, but that's still a free item that they got that could still heal 7. Which, if you're rolling the 2d4 plus 2, getting 7 on that could, chances, I don't know if it's half or less, but getting 7's not that good when the minimum's 4 and the max is 10. Like
Or
there's,
make
yeah.
make like the fresh water and the lemonades for the humans, not for the Pokemon.
That's an awesome idea too, right? Like if you make an
You get them
item
from
where
vending
it's
machines,
vending
right?
machines for the players to heal with. Because so far
Right.
there's nothing really in this module or book, and that's something we can maybe get into a future episode of, at least for Pokemon D&D specifically. While the trainers have health, there's no way in this to use an item to heal a trainer that's in the book. And that's what
You
we're
just have
saying.
to short rest.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying, like the candy bar can be for the trainers, freshwater or soda or lemonade could be for the trainers, and that's a way to heal them as trainers, because as players will see in a future episode, some players get hurt. Like, it can happen. You're out with wild animals.
Yeah. And speaking of being out with wild animals, what happens in those random situations if you get attacked, if something gets a crit on you, how do we handle those crits? And in our rule set homebrew, we do crits with full dice rolls. So what I mean by that is when say say me as a player, and I'm going to attack an enemy 5 feet away with a melee attack. If I get a crit roll, a nat 20 on it, then let's say I'm using a dagger, 1d4. I will deal 4 plus whatever I roll on that 1d4 plus my modifier. And as a player, I know that I it's a love-hate relationship because it works with enemies too, right, DM?
Yeah, and that's the same thing too. If people are like, well, you're giving your players, if they can use healing items and stuff, the same thing is for trainers, right? There's some gyms that like later on in the game where the gym leaders use items. It would be the same equivalent because in the game it's the same thing, right? If they use a super hyper potion, it's going to heal them that set amount. So gym leaders or even other trainers on their pathway in the Pokemon D&D 5e can use the healing items fully. Or if it's a bad monster or if it's some sort of human NPC or something that could drink a potion of healing in normal D&D, that's where they can any benefit I give my players, the same thing is reflected to the enemies. So it's still fair.
Yeah. Which that comes back to the randomness of the dice. So even though it is making it more beneficial, the risks are also higher.
There. Yeah, and to illustrate again, right? So let's say if it's like a 2d4 plus 2 weapon, and the plus 2 weapons are mod, right? To illustrate for people, you use the full dice amount, like you said. So it would be, let's say you roll a nat 20, you would do 2d4 plus, instead of plus 2, you do plus 10, because you have the 2d4, add the top numbers 4, plus the 2, you get the modifier of 10. And in that way, too, it lets my players know, okay, this crit actually deals a lot of damage. Like, I found their weak spot. Because you could crit and roll those 2 1s on that d4 for an extra, and you're like, well, I just dealt, 2 extra damage on my crit? And when you're fighting stuff that has a lot of health, 2 damage is not going to mean that much in the long run. Where instead of by adding that full dice amount, even if an enemy rolls that, you as a player is now scared. You're like, oh crap, like I'm going to get hit for a lot of damage coming up here from the enemy because they found my weak spot.
Absolutely. And I feel like HP in 5e is kind of a fickle thing because, when you hit an enemy, even if it's an attack that in say a novel that you're reading, you stab something in the head, chances are it'll die. But with HP, that's not always the case. It could take multiple stabs before death. But if you get that crit, then you have the potential to one hit kill something with the right HP amount, which is so satisfying as a player.
Yeah, and even to go with the full damage amount, right? Because if your DM decides to roll outside the screen, and I know some DMs don't use a screen, and for when I do with my players, 9 times out of 10, I roll the dice on roll 20 so they can see. So if they're like, well, that last attack just hit me for 1d10 plus whatever the mod was, now that's 10 extra damage in addition to that mod that's being added to when they hit me. And if you look at your Pokemon, and you're like, my Pokemon's only got a max of 20 health, if that 1d10 rolls high, plus that extra 10, my mod's in trouble. I think, if I even remember correctly, I think that happened episode 1. I think somebody got bodied, right out of the gate. But I could be wrong. I'm trying to remember.
No, I think so. In the fight with the
professor. Was it with the Pichu? I think it was Ama's Pichu, but this was a while ago. But
yeah.
Could be wrong.
Yes, there's certainly situations that come up where it's good and bad, and I like it. It's good. With crits, we also have implemented the rule of fumble charts, and what those are is, say you roll a nat 1, the other side of the coin, and you would look at the fumble chart and roll a separate die, and whatever you get is that fumble, the negative effect that happens opposite to getting a positive crit. So what are some of those examples?
Yeah. DM? So, for example, right now I'll roll how about this? I'll roll one and I'll let you roll one, right? So I
Sure.
just rolled a D100 and I got a 46. Okay. So if I go to my fumble chart for 46, it's the effect of on the fumble chart is embargo. You can't use items for the rest of the encounter on this Pokemon. So it's like the move, right? So not like the Pokemon's just like too scared for you to use items on them, and that's like its penalty, which could be huge. You know, you can't use potions, you can't use X attacks, etc. Like you can't use anything on the Pokemon for the rest of this encounter, and that's pretty impactful. Same for the enemies. Like if they're holding an item, or if it's a trainer that has an item that they could use on the Mon, whether it's like a citrus berry or orange berry, they no longer can't use that. This Pokemon will refuse it. Like it's like I can't eat right now. I'm in the middle of a battle. You know, like stuff's going on. I'm just so anxious. I can't eat.
Yeah, that potion that we just talked about that heals so much.
Yeah,
Can't use it.
you can't use that now. And it's like, well, unless I'm like a grass type or those rare other moves that can heal me that's outside of that, you know, it's like I'm in trouble.
Yeah, what a punishment that is.
Right? Like what did you roll for your D100?
My D100 came out to be if I hit clear. 93.
93. Okay. That one is called Self-Inflicted Wound. Your attack ricochets back and you hit yourself. Roll your damage as if you had hit your target and apply it to yourself. So that's huge, right?
That could be messy. Yeah.
That could be messy. So if it's a stab move, obviously you sometimes are resistant to your own attacks. But if it's like using like a dragon move or a ghost move, that's gonna that's gonna hurt you more, right? Like that's impactful.
Ghost, yeah.
Like that's strong. Like that can make a game difference. Like you're not even fighting a ghost enemy, but now you just took the equivalent of ghost damage or dragon damage. Like that's
turn the tables real quick.
And that does that. And then the enemy now gets a turn on you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 attacks on you before you get another turn. Not even considering if there's any other enemies in this fight.
Yeah. Or, you know, your Pokemon is low on, or you as a character are low on HP. You're against that BBEG and boom, they end up hitting themselves, you know? That could
turn the tables too, right? Like if it tries to use like a move like Ice Shard and the shards ricochet back and stab itself back in the eye or something. Like that's, you know, that's huge because you're now like, okay, team. It almost is like, I don't want to say morale boost, but it makes the other side feel, okay, I now have a shot at this.
For sure.
Where if things looked bleak for the heroes, right, and all of a sudden the enemy crit fails and they stab themselves in the eye with an attack, and they're like, oh, quick, they wasted. And it's important too, right? Because not only did you take damage, you used your turn to hurt yourself or other teammates if it ricochets back and it's an AoE effect.
Right. Or it's a move with only 3 PP. That's one of your 3 PP.
Yeah, like head smash, or like there's some moves that are like if it's like an AoE effect that you can target on an enemy that now hits you or your other teammates.
Yep. What was that? Ice Dagger, right?
Like Ice Knife in D&D 5. Yeah, D&D 5e, right? With Ice Knife where it's like now you're hitting, instead of hitting just the enemies, the ice shards ricochet back and hit you and your teammates that are around you in that range. You know, like that's, now it's like, I not only hurt myself, I hurt my teammates and they took damage without even the enemies going yet. And I wasted my turn. Obviously that's towards the top end of this list, but really a lot of things on this list are not that good, you know? Now granted, this list is modified more so for the Pokemon aspect, but this could be for anything as far as D&D as a whole, you know?
A homebrew. Again, you can add, subtract any of these, anything you want.
Yeah, and I feel like by giving players and enemies the full amount for their dice roll on crits, having a strict fumble chart is the other end, you know?
Exactly.
Like, those are bad stuff. Like, while you got a nat 20 to do an awesome turn, you now could roll a 1 and face consequences of even just killing your character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, one of them on this fumble list, even could just screw up your whole game plan. Like, one of them, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. It's called It Scared Me. On your turn, your Pokemon begs to be switched out with another team member if applicable.
Oh, gosh.
So, like, you're now like, well, I just sent out my guy because I know my other guys are weak to this thing. And now the guy just sent out is begging with me to switch back out and won't do his turn until he's switched out.
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, that's pretty big. Not only does
Yeah.
it screw up your game plan, but it could screw up the other teammates' plans if they're relying on you to set up or do something else to help them. Now it's like, well, I guess that's not happening.
Yeah. I think it also gives a lot of opportunities for role play moments too,
Yes,
because,
for
you
sure.
know, if there's moments where, like, just in that example, your Pokemon seems scared of that enemy, well, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe
It had a bad past with them, right?
past with a
Yeah.
Pokemon getting attacked by Spearows, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it opens a lot of doors.
And opens those doors for players to be able to then say like later on, like just speaking with their group, but like maybe there's a secret that they kept hidden. And this is like a moment where it's like even if the player's thinking on their feet, now it's something that could be like a thing that's carried through the rest of the campaign because they rolled that one nat one on in combat, you know?
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
I don't think anything here is super crazy on the list, meaning they're not like super detrimental. I think one of like the worst, there's like two that are kind of the worst. One of them is like exhausted, your move runs out of PP, right?
Yeah,
So like
that could
if
be
that's your
annoying.
only damaging move,
True.
then that Pokemon's in trouble. It's like, well, and then it's like, well, did you bring a berry that could heal up its PP? If it's like, I think a Lepa berry and things like that, you know?
Yeah, chances are no, unless you know,
Mm.
have been looking for it.
Or if it's like the Pokemon forgets how to use the move that causes fumble until a long rest. Like that's even worse than running out of PP, because if you sleep at night and heal, but it's a short rest or whatever, and you don't restore PP, like, you know, if you don't have it till a long rest, at least if you use a berry, you can regain its PP. This one, it's stuck
Yeah,
until a long rest, right? So it's like, well, that's my only damaging move. This guy's kind of
yeah. Could be a
useless.
whole session or two at least. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. If and sometimes like if you guys don't take a long rest because you're doing stuff during the day, it's like, well, now I can't use my only one guy that could counter this.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and you know, you could even potentially roll multiple nat ones on the same mon, and that.
yeah, and then they'll stack, right? And that's where
Right.
it's just it's crazy because even if there's some here, like not to spoil too much on the list, because obviously there's a lot on this list, but one of them is roll twice on this chart and apply both effects to yourself. Like that's an
Wow.
effect you could get, and it's called horrible aftermath. Like now it's like I not only messed this up, but I could do something that could hurt other people or take twice the punishment, whether it's enemies hitting me, if it's me having now a status ailment on me that makes sense with what's going on. Like, you know,
Right.
there's some impactful stuff here. So, and that's to help compensate, like we said, because obviously we're getting full crit values. You need to
Yeah.
have a good balance with that. So,
Exactly. For the enemy's sake too.
mhm. And like so, like we've said, this is like so far been like good general improvements for like just D&D as a whole. I know we talked about Pokemon a bit, but these are still the same for normal D&D. You know, like as players, like if you lose your weapon, like that's
Break
huge.
it.
Or you break
Yeah.
your weapon. Like now the guy that only is like brought his longsword because he's proficient with like longsword specifically. Now he has to use a weapon like those extra weapons you pick in the beginning. You know, where you're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I guess I'll pick a dart or a whip or etc. Now, if that's the
Yeah.
only
Just
thing
a
he has,
random.
now that makes a roleplay moment where it's like, okay, those choices that you made in the beginning of the game to carry those extra little side weapons that people kind of rarely
Yeah.
use, you know, like let's be honest.
Yeah. What? Like, why might you have a quarter staff? You know,
Mm.
why? Is there something about that? Something, you know, is there a reason you have a dart? Like what?
Like, why do you have like a few darts, you know, or like if wizards have like a dagger, it's like, well, you know, if your staff breaks and you now can't cast spells and you're stuck with
Yeah.
this dagger that you picked like from session 0 and you built your character and you're like, oh, I guess I'll just grab a dagger, I guess I'll just grab this. Now if you're stuck with just that, the character implications that could happen, crazy. Like yeah, our spellcaster, like if they break their arcane focus or something, like that's, you know.
Yeah. Or if, their spell quickly becomes like a wild magic chart and you could be hitting anything, everything.
Yeah,
You
polymorphing
never
the
know.
team into sheep, and now it's like, well,
Yeah. There goes whatever plan you could have had.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. What other homebrew rules have we had?
Yeah, so a big one that at least we did this campaign that we mentioned in episode 1 just to get people into it that I wanted to talk about more here, and that's starting beyond level 1. Now, if you are a new DM and you have a lot of new players with you playing for the first time, it's perfectly fine to start at level 1. There's a lot of stuff that the DM and the players have to remember of what's going on. Now, if this is somebody, or you feel that these are players that are pretty good with these kind of games, maybe they played Pathfinder a lot, maybe they've played other kind of fantasy role-playing games, my recommendation, whenever I have players start with me that are with somewhat experienced, is to start them beyond level 1. And we did that to talk about the Pokemon one first, right? Level 1, yeah, you get your starter Pokemon, you get your specialization, and specializations are like, okay, I'm a swimmer, I'm a camper, engineer, etc., right? And it's like, oh, okay, if I'm the engineer, I can increase my int by 1, and I get a +1 bonus to all skill checks made by any of my electric Pokemon. Cool. How does that help me roleplay-wise? Maybe I'm some sort of, like, techie or a gearhead on the side. Cool. Level 2 in the Pokemon D&D is Trainer Path, right? And then that's where things start to come in. Trainer paths are things like, where are you a researcher? Are you a Pokemon collector? Are you a grunt? Are you a nurse? Like, these are things that impact your character, in my opinion, a little more than just saying, okay, I'm a gearhead on the side, or, oh yeah, I like to swim, I'm a swimmer, I get my little water bonuses,
Yeah, because those are for types.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas the trainer path, that's you as a player. That's almost like a second background.
Yeah, and that's like if you've seen the anime or the games, right? Like, Brock's like a chef or like a breeder, like that's his thing. Like, he wants to do that, and that's what helps kind of shape him as, I want to say, a character. Where Ash is more like a battler guy that goes out doing things.
He's the trainer. Yeah,
he's like the trainer. Whether if I don't know if 100% of Ash would be defined as an ace trainer, or maybe like a commander because of his bond with Pokemon and having a starting loyalty as the top tier and things. But
yeah, there's definitely one for him. I forget what it is called specifically, but yeah, it really fleshes out who you are. And for Gregory, as an example, he works in the research lab, and that's how he met Scott's character, or Mike Scott's character, Scott Mike's character. Gosh,
yeah.
So like it again, for it can be the bond between your character and the world or other characters.
And I know, at least for us too, we did those, and then we had other types of backgrounds for our characters, at least. That at least helped shape, that was homebrew-esque, in whether if it's like being the athlete, right? Or a Pokefriend, or a connoisseur. And that was good for like starting, right? Because that gives you extra starting equipment and extra skill proficiencies. And that's a total homebrew thing. I'll be sure to put the link to that down below if you want to look into that with your players and stuff. Like, for example, you were the studious, right? Which was like the brain. So you had like your skill proficiencies in investigation, history, and your item knowledge specifically, which makes good role-playing moments, was TMs.
Yes, haven't used it yet, but
I haven't used it yet. And that's where, when it happens, I'm sure it'll be a cool moment when it happens,
Yeah, that roleplay moment of, oh yeah, by the way, my character can, has this tool belt of information that, can otherwise wouldn't really happen. It would just be a normal check. It'd be, oh, do I know what this TM is? Nothing really too flashy.
Yeah, and to even say that we see early on, like the early on episodes, right? Sky's character Charlie starts with Pokeballs that are more than just the average Pokeballs.
Yeah.
And that proves so useful for her early on when it comes to trying to catch things. Getting that extra plus, like, I think it's 5 something to her animal handling Pokeball catch.
Yeah. So she was rolling +9s to catch Mons right out of the gate, and it's like, that's huge
And
because none of them are more than 20 off the bat. I don't think so.
no, not that I can think of. At least not in your
Yes,
catching range for now.
yeah. I mean, you roll at least a 50% on your dice rolls, and you're pretty good.
Yeah, like a 10 plus 9 is a 19. Like, unless it's like a nat 1. I think one time she, like, early on to spoil stuff, but like, I think it was like a really low number and she like just missed it. But like, a plus
Yeah,
9 when you guys
yeah,
are level like 2 to trying to catch mons is huge.
huge. Definitely. And it creates those moments between your Pokemon because again, starting at level 2, we've had a whole level, a certain amount of time where we've already had our Pokemon, and
Your starter, you mean, right?
yes, our
Yeah.
starter. So in Gregary's case is Piplup. There's a bond that's already been formed between them, so that that plays a role in how they interact with the world rather than, oh, here's a new Pokemon that I've never met before. If something happened to them now, it would be much more catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. And I know you talk about Pokemon D&D a lot, but this is the same for normal D&D, I feel. Like, thinking of like 3, right? Druids is like one of the biggest ones that sticks out to me. Yes, level 1 as a druid, right? I get spells, I get the run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. But I don't feel like I'm my full druid yet until like at level 1, okay, you get druidic, you're able to cast spells. Okay. Like to
Yeah.
read druidic, right? Like druidic, the secret language of druids, you can speak the language, use and leave hidden messages, and like spellcasting, okay, I get cantrips, I get some spells early, yeah, I get like 2 first level spells, but I don't actually get to do the fun druid things that define me and stick me out a little more than the other spellcasters. And that's with
Right.
wild shaping. By being able to turn into creatures, the amount of roleplay and combat stuff that can develop from that just by starting at level 2 can help your players feel more like, okay, I picked this class and I get to do special things for this class. Like if you're the only druid on the team, you're the only one that can turn into like a rat that can sneak into the castle for intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody, like maybe they got conjure a familiar later on that could do that for them, but then it's like you lose kind of the roleplay aspect where if you start at level 2 for your adventures, like you can become the rat that can sneak in the cave and can see what the goblins are up to as recon and then come back out and let players know, okay, there's like 3 goblins in this next room.
Exactly. And I feel like from a player's perspective, when we start at level 2, it's not like we're just fresh out of boot camp, right? We're actual adventurers with actual powers that separate us from every run of the mill fighter with a short sword. And it really adds that depth
Mm-hmm.
that I think is important, because it's like, again, it's just the more puzzle pieces you have, a better picture you can paint about your character.
Yeah, and so like we looked at like the druid for a bit, and not to say that druid's the only one, but then you got like the monk being the next one, right? Where it's
Big one.
like monks don't get their key until 2nd level.
Yeah.
And key
And that
is
is
a big thing.
exactly.
You get features like Flurry of Blows, right? Patient Defense and Step of the Wind, I think are like some of the key things you get when you're like first like level 2 there.
Yeah, early levels, really getting to that level 2, level 3, that's where the first kind of benchmark of your characters comes in.
Yeah, like so just looking at it, right? Flurry of Blows, you immediately after you take the attack action, you can spend one of your key points to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action, so you get more hits in. Or you can spend a key point to take the dodge action as a bonus. Or you can spend 1 key point to disengage or even dash. And that's where you feel more like, okay, I'm the quick flying around, jumping. I kind of picture like I picture Kung Fu Panda in a way, where it's like, yeah, I start as Poe, but I want to be like tigers, And I don't get to be Tigress until I get to be like level 2 where I get to do all the extra stuff, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Instead, I'm just like Poe in the beginning where it's like, trying like every other guy.
Failing most often.
Failing most
Yeah,
often, yeah. I don't get to do the fun dodging extra kicks every once in a while, you know?
for sure.
And like a third thing, just to hit the nail home here, wizards, right? Yeah, I can cast spells. I can
Hmm.
cast spells like the paladin. I can cast. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I know every class has certain class specific spells, but you cantrips and level 1 spells, you kind of all have the kind of run of the mill like firebolt, etc. You know, and it's like wizards get their arcane tradition, where it's I get to now pick a class of spells to specialize in, whether it's evocation, necromancy, and that's like a big character defining thing too. You know, is my wizard going to be somebody that's lucky in like doing evocation, alteration, things like that, or am I going to be somebody that's going to go down the necromancer path? And I haven't told the other group members yet, but the DM knows I want to do it. So I've been secretly collecting bones when no one else is looking to try to start to raise an undead army. Like that's a huge character concept thing that your character would not be able to explore if they didn't really start at level 2 to get that ball rolling, you know?
For sure.
Okay, so kind of want to do a little thing now where we go in between our little topics and we have this thing where we want to call a pokepause. So, little thing where we get to do little side things away from these two topics quick. So, first thing being, we each got like a little fun fact, little thing to just kind of share with each other, a little trivia for those two at home. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Um, I can go first.
All right, sure.
So this fact is one that I found out recently, and uh, it's really interesting that Game Freak hasn't monopolized on this yet because um, when I say what the fact is, it's gonna seem kind of weird that it's not a thing, but apparently the only type combo for dragon that isn't used, so dragon and something else, the only one that isn't used is dragon and bug. And I say that this is really interesting because we have Flygon,
Mm-hmm.
which is a dragonfly. So I don't know, do with that what you will. But there's the fun fact. What's your fun fact?
And like, not to like go at it, right? But Vibrava looks like a bug. And if you evolve from a
True.
Trapinch. Like, yes, Trapinch is a ground type, but it evolves into something that looks like a bug.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know Vibrava is a ground bug Pokemon. But like,
Yeah.
it's the vibration Pokemon. Like, don't get me wrong, like ground and dragon, I guess could vibrate, but then it looks like a bug. And then Flygon looks the perfect example as a bug dragon.
Right. Like yeah, like dragonfly is what it
Yeah,
that's what it is.
it looks like a. I mean, it's the mystic Pokemon in quotes, but like, I get you. And I see what you're saying. Like, they're missing a chance for a literal dragonfly. Like, they could play off that so well, you know? Instead of
Yeah.
giving us, like, our fourth cat as an
It seems
example.
so obvious too. Like dragonfly, it's a bug dragon. Like
Yeah, like, they have normal dragon before they had bug dragon. Like,
yeah, and where's the variant Flygon where it is a dragonfly? You know, we have all these regions.
with different
You know,
regional
although
variants, there could be
yeah,
a bug, yeah.
like
Give it.
Sword and Shield. Come on.
Give it scales or something, you know, like, to resemble more of, like, I mean, maybe not scales, but like make it look more bug-esque, I guess. It's already a bright green, but like you could have definitely a regional variant, or if it's like Gigamax Flygon or something, and then
Right to
that's
get the
like,
alternate type.
it's a larger, like literally like a dragonfly with its wings beating so fast.
Yeah.
That could be cool. All right, so for mine was, and I thought this was a really kind of cool fun fact. So apparently, the Pokemon Cubone can learn two water moves. Those being Bubble Beam and Water Gun. Now, it can only learn it in Gen 1. from getting the TM11 and TM12, TM11 being bubble beam and 12 being water gun. But the fact that this little guy can shoot bubbles and shoot a beam of water, and this like little ground type guy.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
And like you can move it up if you really want to go through the whole process of moving it up. But then like it's like then you have a Marowak that knows those moves. Like that would catch people off guard. Like I would not be expecting to have water moves coming at me from a Cubone, let alone a Marowak.
Yeah. Yeah, and like how did it even learn the water move? Because none of it, even in the lore, none of its ancestors were water types.
No.
Or were they?
Like, if I look at things that are compatible with it, like, yeah, I mean, like, okay, it can learn moves from its parents through, like, breeding, right? Where it's like, yeah, it can learn. The only moves that I can see that it can learn via its parents from looking at different gens, right? Is only like rock normal moves that I've been able to see. I mean, there's some fighting, maybe some steel, but there's not like it can learn any other sorts of water moves. And like, yes, while it can learn and it can mate with Totodile and Lapras and Squirtle for things, those are things like of normal moves like Skull Bash. Like to me, that makes sense for a Cubone to have because it literally has a bone skull that it would hit into things.
Right.
But learning like those water moves via TM was just, I thought, very surprising and not anything I would, think of right out of the gate of fighting a Cubone and all of a sudden it's spraying me with a water gun or a bubble beam.
Right. And why does it need it? Because isn't ground already super effective to fire?
I don't know about that. I mean, fire damages it normally.
Oh no, I mean, like, so say Cubone knows a ground move.
Yeah.
Isn't that already super effective against fire?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And electricity. So what does it need water for?
Yeah, like it's 2 times weak to ground, rock, and water. I agree. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, if it's fighting a fire type, yeah, why? Yeah. I think it was one of those things that just like slipped and nobody noticed.
Nobody caught on.
Nobody caught it. I'm just curious where this little guy makes the water from.
True. And with the mask, how
does it shoot out the holes in the nose or the mask? Does it spin the bone fast and it just sprays water via the bone? Like, what? Yeah. How does this little ground type, the lonely Pokemon, be able to spray water?
And maybe it's his tears because he's so alone.
And like, heaven forbid, like I don't know. Alolan Marowak couldn't learn it, but that would be crazy having a fire ghost type know a water move. Like,
oh yeah.
But yeah, like, no. Marowak's known as the Bone Keeper Pokemon. So the fact that it can just shoot water from somewhere got everyone confused. Now, granted, yes, it is a TM, so it doesn't, like, learn it via level up naturally. But the fact that it can just learn it, period, was very surprising.
Absolutely.
All right, so those are a little fun fact of the days. And I wanted to get into something that is a great way to help us out. To be able to help us be able to let our editor know that you guys and us, we really appreciate everything that she's doing, being able to edit for all of us. And that's through our Patreon. So the Patreon link will be down below for you guys to check out. And I know we mention it at the end of episodes and things. So it's now time to go into, if you haven't checked it out yet, we'll go quickly into the tiers that are on the Patreon. That way you can help show us support, whether if it's just a donation one time or if it's every month. So the first tier that you could be a part of on the Patreon is known as the Auntie Anita, based on what happened in the first episode. I thought that was a great tier to name it after.
Love it.
Yeah, right? So for just $2 per month, you are able to, by joining this tier, you gain the access to the Q&A text channel that's in our Discord. Discord link will be down below too. So you can join our Discord normally and just chat with us, but if you want to be a part of Q&A and ask us character kind of questions, and then this is where your questions can get answered by us on a future Q&A episode that we can record. And those will appear as a bonus episode somewhere if we get enough questions, etc. And that'd be cool to get the cast together, right? And to hear from you guys, to hear what you think about our characters from what's been uploaded so far. And then they can answer in like character things to try to almost like hear words from you guys, and they can reach out to kind of be like, why did Gregary do that at that time, or why did Charlie do that at that time? What made you
Yeah.
guys choose your starters, etc.? Like, why those ones? Because we don't
Yeah.
go into too much about that in the actual podcast. So that's a good spot where if you have any questions about what's going on in the world, even if it's just to me as the DM and you have just questions for me about what's going on, that's a good way to reach out to us.
Absolutely. We and the players, I'm sure. I know I, at the very least, would love to hear all the questions and be able to answer anything that you guys think of about
Same thing
Gary.
for Katie as Ama and Sky as Charlie. Like, they reached out to me saying like they're hyped to hear from you guys, to hear what questions you have for them because they like to be interactive with our fan base. So that's
sure.
the first tier for just $2 per month. Now, for $5 per month is the Pokédex tier. This one gives you extra. This allows you to experience episodes of what you're listening to right now, DM directions, and whenever we do one shots, you get to hear them a week ahead of everyone else. So before they go into the normal feed on certain things, on certain like platforms, you guys will be able to hear it a week ahead of time from the Patreon. And so what this is you'll be able to hear the DM directions. The talks are done between the co-hosts of DM Told Me To, Ryan and Tyler, and we go into tips on how to enhance your Dungeons & Dragons experience like you've been hearing so far. And in addition, we'll be giving shoutouts to members in this tier and higher once an episode to thank you guys for your constant support. And we've actually gotten a donation from a man by the name of Paul. He donated to us $15 to help us, and that money has gone right to our editor to show her that we appreciate all the stuff she's doing to help us out with this, because let me tell you, it is not easy to crop down hours of content and to make it be nice, crisp, and hearing it great for you guys to hear. So,
yeah. Great work by the whole team, and we'd love to keep, supporting everyone. So if you have a few dollars, price of a coffee cup, just one coffee cup.
Single cup, right?
Price of a coffee, not much. You can be a part of our community, and we'd love to have everyone here.
So, and that will also include that'll include the tier below it, the Antianita tier. So by doing the $5 per month Pokédex tier, you also can have access to the Q&As to be able to ask us questions. Additionally, you'll be able to hear the one-shots that we do, like I said, a week ahead of time. So not just the DM directions, but you'll be able to hear the one-shots that we do ahead of everybody else. So if anything, you can start talking about in the Discord, and the other people are like, wait, what about the one-shots? And you could be like, well, I saw it ahead of time, I got to hear stuff and ask questions about it ahead of time. So other people are like, oh, what kind of thing? So it's awesome.
No spoilers.
Yeah. Try not to spoil too much, but, it's cool. Like that other time you'll be able to hear it ahead of time, give us your comments on the Patreon on what you think about it and all that. So, all right. So that was Pokédex for $5 a month. Now, next one being the third tier, the $10 per month tier. Now we're getting into the whole, yes, you can ask those questions, and we do bonus episodes, the other things where you can hear content ahead of time, which is awesome. Now we get into the $10 per month tier. This is where things start to get, in my opinion, I think, pretty impactful. So this is the Professor Kelp tier. You'll be able to see a picture of Professor Kelp there with his little Quincy, his Kecleon behind him. Now this is the Encounter Creation tier. So for $10 per month, by working with the Professor, you can help shape the world of Ormia through developing an encounter for our players to deal with. This tier will allow you to submit suggestions that impact what could happen within the story. By signing up for this tier, you can suggest characters to be NPCs in Ormia. So if you even want like your name to be an NPC of somebody that they could run into is impactful. You could help create encounters for on future routes for our players. You could create a future legend on routes. You'll be able to see as the game progresses, our heroes will go onto a route and they'll be able to hear the legend of a Pokemon that's on the route, and they could run into that. And if they do, when they go onto that route and hear a legend, or if it's a NPC, or another one here is you'll be able to submit ship upgrades. We'll get into that a few later on in the series, where they'll be able to choose different upgrades for their ships. And if you want to submit to me ideas that they could have to enhance their travel or give them funny and different things that I may not have ever thought about, that will go on. And I will be sure to say, hey, this was submitted by so-and-so on Patreon. And that way you can feel that you are having an impact on what happens to these players in the story. You are leaving your mark in the virtual world for what's happening to these guys on their adventure, you know?
Yeah, that's huge.
And like it says below it there, we could discuss the impact once you sign up. And like I said, you'll be given credit in the encounter creation when it gets used in the podcast. And you also get the Pokédex things. You'll be able to hear things ahead of time. And you can just ask Q&As to everybody. That's also given too. And you'll be given the Professor Kelp tier in the Discord. And same thing for you'll be given the Pokédex tier and the Auntie Anita tier, etc. So the last tier, the big shebang. This one only has currently 3 slots. So that's something where if you want to get in on something that has limited slots, limited opportunities, this is the tier to do it. And that's where you become an honorary member of Last Hope. So what that tier is, you can join and play D&D with us. By buying this tier, you gain the access to play along with the cast in once-a-month one-shots. This can be Pokemon or regular D&D one-shots, your choice. So by doing that, you'll be able to play along with one of us co-hosts here and some of the players and the other people that signed up for this tier here. And you will be able to be recorded as some of the one-shots that could go up on our feed. You could play the game with us. So if you're looking for people to play with, that's a good group of people that you've heard about and want to leave your mark on the digital world, you could sign up for this tier. This one is $20 per month, but of course that's every month you'll be able to do a one shot with us, and it'll be recorded if you so decide to. If people don't want to have it recorded, then obviously we won't make you. But if you want to be recorded and go up on our feed, got 3 slots there waiting for people to hop up and join for that. And of course, like I said, you'll be able to get everything down below. So you'll be able to submit to me encounters. You'll be able to get the content early. You'll be able to get your questions answered for the Q&A and all that.
Yeah. So go ahead, take my spot on the team. You can have it. I don't want it. So is that about wrap it up for our Pokepaws here?
I think so. I could talk about quickly like our goals on the Patreon.
Sure.
Just the first few at least. So if we can get to 20 patrons, we reach the nat 20 of patron support. This will allow us to be able to pay our editor more because she spends hours doing this work to bring you the best content possible, and this would help her critically know her work is being valued.
I see what you did there.
Right? If we can get to 151 patrons, and I'll stop after, I'll leave it at this one for now. If we can get to up to 151 patrons, we will be able to extend the slots of the honorary members of Last Hope to 6 people. So there will be a notification in the Discord about it. We'll make sure to let people know that we will then up it from 3 people to be able to play with us up to 6. Whether that's 2 different groups, what have you. We'll see what happens when that time comes, but it should be dope. And this way we can have a full team to travel with when we get going,
I'd love to play with everyone. But alas, only so many spots.
That's true. If we make it to the next tier, we can open up more slots and things, and it'll be great. Have a bigger group to play with and all that. Did you want to get into other forms of ways that they can see us or follow us for what's going on?
Absolutely. Our biggest form right now, and is vastly growing, is our Instagram account. It's under the same name, DM told me to, lowercase with underscores in between each word. You can go and follow us, and on those accounts, Ryan and I will be posting content, art, announcements, polls around the time of each episode, and it's a way for all of us to stay connected as a community. So be sure to follow that.
For the main campaign, our plan is to get them uploaded the same day every week.
Yeah, and we will do our best. Obviously, life happens, especially during these, I don't even know what to call them, odd times.
That's fair. Yeah, with everything going on. So as we get them out, we'll definitely do our best to make sure that they're weekly uploads, at least for the main campaign. These side ones will be wherever, for the beginning, and then once we get things solidified, we'll figure out where they go. So
Absolutely.
all right. Second topic. specifically Poke D&D improvements, right? Things to help the general book. As of right now, it's generations 1 to generation 6 updated for the book. The last update made in the book was on, not to date it, but the end of January, I believe, is the last update that was made to the book. The one that we're using, at least. So if stuff's updated since then, obviously, there's changes, but ways to help improve that. And while the book goes into details about leveling up characters like players they talk about 2 different ways. And that could be through catching Pokemon and having X number of Pokemon on your team for level amounts, and then that determines what level you as a trainer are by how strong your Pokemon are. And while that is a way of doing it, that becomes a lot of math, and also it becomes a thing where it's like, yes, I've trained up my Pokemon, but does that necessarily mean that me as a trainer has leveled up?
Right. Definitely. And it's not as efficient when you have a larger party, right?
Yeah, and like you could catch a wild Pokemon that's a higher level, so then does that mean that now you as a trainer has leveled up because you caught something that was harder to catch or a higher level mon?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to show player growth as much as it does party growth.
Mm-hmm. And another like idea that the book uses is, oh, well, as a trainer then, instead of choosing your Pokemon levels, you could do Pokemon registered in the Pokédex. And while, yes, that is a good idea, that also, at least to me as a DM, for example, at second, you become character level 2 if you scan 8 Pokemon. Well, if you're traveling in a group of 4, there's half your team, half of the 8 right there. And heaven forbid there's 4 other Pokemon walking around the town, or if you grew up on a farm, as Charlie did, right? And there's other Pokemon there that she could scan. You could be level 2 leaving the first place. And like I said, nothing's wrong with starting ahead of the game, but then this makes every bonus action be, oh, I have to scan that. And then
right.
There becomes a time where we've seen you'll see coming up in future episodes, certain players will only scan certain Pokemon because they've gone out on their own to find something, or it's their encounter.
Right. It creates many opportunities for imbalance among the party.
Yeah, and then that comes to the part where it's like, oh, this guy leveled up before me kind of thing. I have to go out and find other Pokemon to scan, or somebody else goes out hunting by themselves. And then it just becomes, yeah, because after you scan 15 Pokemon, then you're level 3. 25 Pokemon, then you're level 4. Like,
and when you're worried about scanning, you're not role playing.
Exactly. And like Tyler, if you go right now to your decks on the app, if you can, just let me know right now how many Pokemon you guys have scanned. At least you as Gary has scanned. And of course, this is in the future for some episodes, but we're not going to say what those are. We'll just tell you right now how many that he's got for reference.
Yeah. As far as seen, it seems to be about 30.
Right. So right now you would be a 4th level trainer. And you would be 5 scans away from being level 5 as a character. And that's a 4th of the game, because level 20 is the max in D&D.
Yeah, and
that's where it's like, what has you as a character up to this point? And obviously, we don't have to go into specifics, but what have you as a character? Do you feel like your character should be a 4th of the way leveled up all the way?
Right. Haven't done that. I haven't reached those milestones.
Yeah, like character growth changes, and that's where in D&D, normal D&D, I feel it's different, right? And that's because, at least in my mind, you as people are just fighting monsters. And then you gain XP based on the monsters, or DMs give out based on roleplay, etc. They get bonus XP, etc.
Right.
In this, it's not just you, it's different guys on your team that you are in control of. Now, if we did it whereas your characters gain XP, in addition to your mons, that could be an idea. Never one I dabble with, just something I thought of right off the cuff right now. Mm-hmm. But the way that I at least like to do Pokemon D&D specifically compared to normal D&D. Or this is applicable to normal D&D too, but I like to use milestones specifically in Poke D&D. And the book doesn't go into that as an idea, where certainly we homebrew, and this is, the segment's dedicated to homebrewing. And the way that I like to do milestones, that I encourage people, because I found it easier as a DM and I think as a player, where the way I like my milestones to be is, let's say that there's 8 gyms in a region, and this is kind of based on the Pokemon games in a way too. Right before you get to every gym, there's always like some major story thing, or you go into some bad guy's base, you stop them from destroying a lake, etc., right? And then you go to like a gym. When you do something major halfway through, that's when your character should gain a level. And then after they beat the gym, they should gain another level, right? So character-wise in Poke D&D could be, if they do something big story impact wise, either affecting them, the world, etc., then they should gain that level, which should be about halfway if you've planned out. Now, some DMs plan, some DMs don't, which nothing's wrong with either, but if you're somebody that plans, then you can be like, okay, this will be X number of episodes, X number of sessions, in like air quotes, because obviously you don't know what could happen, but this was about halfway-ish to making it to them to the next gym. They should gain a level. And in that way, them as trainers feel, okay, we've done stuff in the world to have an impact, and we've gone through a little bit of character growth. Instead of just scanning everything that they can see along the road. Then that makes, as DM, it's like, well, Wild Encounters is scans. Trainers is scans. However, but I try to use variety.
Right. Like, what's impacting the character when we're just battling Weedles on the path?
Exactly.
Not much.
You haven't grown too much as a character.
Yeah, there's no life lesson in that.
Life lessons or things you've picked up on. It's like, oh yeah, I can fight better, or oh, I know now more about Pokemon. And it's like, okay, yes, you do. And like I want to say too, while these options aren't bad, my recommendation would be, at least for Poke D&D specifically, if you're a DM planning, and that's why you're listening, to kind of hear some advice from DM, telling you some advice. And even as a player, I'm sure Tyler can say, instead of having to worry about scanning, or, oh, I need my mons to be certain levels, and then I have to do math to figure out what's their total Pokemon levels needed for me as a trainer to level up. How does that work?
Right, because, I mean, when I think of scanning, you see in shows, the anime of Pokemon, you see Ash constantly scanning to learn about the Pokemon around him, but you don't see every other character always scanning.
Exactly.
So I
That's
think
an awesome point.
It plays into part of what is the personality of the person? Are they the person that needs to constantly scan, or are they the kind of character that just would rather enjoy the sight of them and the mystery of it, without reading every single detail all the time and always stopping, And
then that way too, at least as a DM to players, while reading Dex entries are nice, you can describe the Pokemon a bit and have them try to figure out what it is, and then when they scan it and be like, oh, it's this, okay, then they'll get some recognition as players. Now, their characters may not have run into this before, or they may have, and then that's a part where it's like the player versus the character, which is certainly an idea to talk about in the future too. But
for sure, yeah, how to be a good role-playing character. Definitely.
Yeah, compared to somebody that is constantly trying to get levels to make themselves stronger, and there's nothing, like I said, these ideas for character advancement that the book has provided are two okay ideas. I personally think Milestones is just better, and I recommend it to people that are new to this kind of thing, because then it makes it seem like you can use a variety of different mons that they could encounter on the routes and stuff, and then that doesn't limit what you could give them. Because if you're afraid, like, oh my god, my player's gonna be level 5 before they make it to the first gym, like, because you're giving them different stuff. They're running into NPCs and stuff, which is great. That's role playing moments, you know. They're surrounded by these creatures known as Pokemon. They should have good role playing moments, but then that shouldn't have them accelerate as far as in terms of levels.
And I think an important thing to note is that in regular D&D, when you're using the EXP system as opposed to milestone, it almost falls into this rigidness of, if I'm not slaying everything, I'm not getting XP.
I'm not getting,
Whereas if they have that brilliant plan that is executed in a great way and you want to reward your character, well, they thought a plan through. That seems like a milestone to me, even though they might not have slayed the giant beast, you know?
And then this way too, and you bring up a really good point with that, Ty. This way too, the players aren't, because the way that these two are laid out is like, okay, I need to be immersive in Pokemon and be out in the field finding Pokemon or catching high level Pokemon. It's either, according to these two, not to say that they're bad, like I've said, but according to these two, option one being, okay, I need to grind up my Pokemon levels and grind out in the woods. And then other players are like, okay, I guess we'll do a grinding session instead of continuing on with the story to get our levels higher so that our trainer levels feel higher. Or the other one is like, we have to go out and scan stuff, and every 2 seconds, like, oh, can I scan that? Can I scan that? Is there any birds in the sky? Can I scan them? Is there any bugs crawling around? Can I scan them? It takes you out of that. And obviously some players are good, but there are some players that will want to level up fast. Nothing's wrong with that. But almost by making it be a milestone system that the DM can control, the DM can then be like, okay, I feel that they've done enough impactful stuff as character growth and world changing. Or one or the other, it doesn't have to be and, but they've done some stuff as characters to earn that character level up versus grinding Pokemon or scanning Pokemon. Because ultimately, it's you as the character that's changing. Your Pokemon get XP from fighting. You as the character, what have you done to develop and change?
Yeah, it gives us incentive to be active in the world.
And to be role-playing. Like you've said, you know, it shouldn't, and that's part of me. Now, if you're doing a Pokemon D&D campaign where you are grinding out constantly, like if it's like almost like a Pokemon mystery dungeon where you are, you know, exploring, fighting things as being a Pokemon, or it's like a dungeon crawl in a Pokemon world, which doesn't sound like too crazy. Like it sounds like a fun idea. You should have to realize that now by doing that, just there's some less role-playing implementations, which some people might not even want to role-play. Some people like D&D for the hack and slash, and that's fine. But there are some players that in your group that might enjoy the role playing and don't want to hack and slash all the time.
Yeah, and this milestone system is good because even if you are the hack and slash player or the Pokédex scanner, the battler, you can still do all that just as easily. It just also ramps up the reward for other things too.
Yeah, and then that way it's like, yes, you grind it up a bit or you've scanned stuff a lot, but now like once you reach that certain milestone that the DM has set, some world-changing thing that you've done before you make it to the gym, like I said, so you kind of do like every other level, right? You do a level before the gym, then the gym, before the gym, etc. Or in our case, in our story, towers, etc.
Right.
Or whatever
you're grinding, you'll breeze right through the fights.
And that's fine. And if that's what you want to do as a player, you know, that's okay.
Right. It's just, I'm just saying, it's still capable. The capabilities are still there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next topic being tables versus planned encounters, right? And this is where I've done D&D both ways. I've done it where, and I've done a Pokemon campaign both ways like this, actually. I've done it where I've had 3 planned events for my characters get through a quote-unquote day, and then they're in the nighttime. And then we do it this way for this campaign that we're doing here, that I like better, where I will plan maybe 1 a day, if that, and then the rest is them rolling. See what they can get. Because ultimately, that's what D&D's like about, you know? Rolling to see what wild things you can encounter. And that's why you guys as listeners always hear me go, okay, roll a D100 to see what you encounter, another D100 if you want to see if it's shiny, and then a D12. And then that way too, and as DMs, if you need a good tip on preparing stuff, all you have to do then is make a table. You can use that table for routes. Like if they're 2 connecting routes, there can be some overlap in what you encounter. Like My table's a simple D1 through 100, and like some of them range from, like for example, it's like 1 to 8, 9 to 15, 16 to 34, and I'll put one Pokemon for each of those increments. So like a Pidgey might be 1 through 8, a Sunkern might be 9 through 15, a Combee 16 through 34, as an etc. And that's a big jump, but that was just because of what I wanted to do, because that Pokemon's more common. And that's like the games, right? You encounter rarer stuff in the games. And this way the players feel, oh, okay, I could have a chance of encountering different random things. And then you as DM's like, okay, they will roll to see what they encounter. And then the D12 list I use is things where it's like, oh, is it defending a territory or an item? Is it protecting a fellow Pokemon? Is it stealing an item? Is it attacking you out of nowhere and gets a surprise attack? Because these are wild creatures, you know?
Right. And from a player perspective, when we're rolling, it's almost like, not that we've controlled, but it's that there's some sort of consequence of the situation that we have been placed in or put ourselves in. You know, if I roll on a chart for a fumble or for the encounter of me being in the wild, you know, that's something that I have some sort of impact on. And it makes me pay attention more.
Yeah, and for best advices for using a table versus planned encounters, that's up to what the DM likes. If you want to be somebody that is planned to a T and is like, okay, they're going into this, run into this, run into this, that's okay. If that's what you as a DM likes, that's fine. Some players like just being told, okay, this happens, this happens. Other players I've come to find like the blend. So I might have a fixed encounter for them, but they can roll at different times during the days. And in that way too, it does, if you don't have a planned thing have like 3 or 4 actions that they're going to do a day planned, it opens it up more to the session's not taking super long, right, Ty? Because we've run into that, where it might be 3 or 4 sessions and your characters haven't made it through a single day of travel yet. You know,
Absolutely.
and those sessions could last like 4 to 5 hours, and that's 20 hours of in-game, like 20 hours of you spent for just getting through one possible day of in-game time.
Absolutely, and it can be hard, especially when some players want the railroad story, as some call it.
Yeah,
while others want to just explore and
the sandbox versus the railroad, right? Where it's like players can sandbox to see what they find hiding in the sand, where the other group is like, okay, we're on these tracks, let's go. And that's fine. And if you're new DM too, setting up for things, this is where you can kind of ask your players. For example, what I did was I asked my players, hey, if you guys could give me a list of Pokemon that you would want to ever encounter to have on your team, to have some interest of mons that they would enjoy to have. And then I use that and sprinkle those into my routes every once in a while to give them some incentive where if they roll on it, they could be like, oh, that's a Pokemon I want to use, you know? Yeah. And that's what makes the players feel like that the DM's listening. The DM will then have more players that are active and happy and want to play more because they get to use these Pokemon that they get to use. And that's what makes Pokemon D&D different than the games, you know? The games is like, okay, I have to go do this fixed thing. I have no control over it. Poke D&D is your players do whatever, then you make the world interact for them. You know? If they choose to attack an NPC that's traveling along the pathway instead of helping them, there might be some repercussions to that. Like, stuff might change later on in the story because they did that. It might not have been what you planned, but you have to, you know, adapt where if it's a sandbox encounter or what have you versus planned, etc. So I like to do a blend personally. That's me. I might put 1 or 2 planned encounters a day. The rest is just have them roll to see, because in that way they feel like, okay, we're traveling, we're progressing with the story, we're running into wild mons, we can run from them. Like in the games, you can run from them. That's a concept in the book. So if they're rolling, if they're rolling out a table and they're like, well, we don't kind of want this, we'll just run, you know, and that's fine. And that's part of the day done for you as DMs. Like, okay, now they're done, we can move on to the next story aspect.
Definitely.
Now, do you as a player have any opinion on the whole concept of tables being sandboxy versus planned railroad?
It definitely is a nice blend, because while it is a railroaded list, you still feel the chance. When you see a 2 quickly switch into a 19 or whatever you have on the dice, it's like, oh wow, that roll that could have been a potentially poor encounter could easily, just as easily turn into something like the legend of the root. And with the legends, you don't know what number you're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is just that randomness, while also having in the back of your mind, chances are something I want could be here.
Yeah,
So it's nice.
and that's where it's kind of like it could be the whole like the legend could be 98 to 100 on D100. It could be the 24 to 27. And by mixing it up and keeping your players on their toes, while getting the top end feels nice in D&D as a whole, by randomizing the root numbers a lot, that way they feel okay. I could roll any number and it could be like a heat or something on my list I want, or it could be a Weedle. Like there's that variety to it that you as the DM has the power to, if you just want to make a table and then have a few quick session things set up for your players that like the power of feeling I can roll to see what I get. It's just great for a player. For some,
it does. You can do that with magical item lists too.
Yes, you can. Yes, there's a lot of magic item lists that you can make. Like if you're like, okay, I know my guy's a wizard and he would like, these are a list of rare wizard items to give, or these are a list of common trinkets to give out to players. If they find 2 trinkets, roll to see what treasure you find.
Absolutely. It gives more opportunities for role play as well. You get an item that's somewhat related to your character, and boom, you got like another hook.
And what could be good too is like a last thing to say on this topic of plan versus tables, right? If it's a table for the general group to roll on, there might be some stuff that's better for certain people than others. And then that comes down to the whole, do you as the player maybe trade later on if they get a cool item? Do you use this one mundane item in a really cool way? Like if it's like for example, like a bucket with a hole. I know in one of my other campaigns I've done, one of the players had this bucket with a hole, and they used it to hide their face from like this wild creature. And then later on, the creature ended up being a person, but that person had no idea what Buckethead looked like underneath. So that other person, while they knew what the shape-shifting animal guy looked like, that shape-shifting animal guy had no idea what Buckethead looked like.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so by like having that hole in the bucket where they could see out of it, like that was where it was like a cool character thing where they use this random mundane trinket of just finding a bucket with a hole in it.
Yeah.
In a cool way.
The utility, yeah.
The utility aspect. And that's what makes Pokemon D&D cool, is you can use your Pokemon for utility in addition to normal items, but they're also your friends.
One of my favorite things to do, honestly. Really is. Can't wait to get a Vine Whip. You see in the anime, using Vine Whip for everything, making rope, making ladders, grabbing stuff, the cookies on the top shelf.
Dude, the cookies on the top shelf, for sure. And speaking of Pokemon, right, and this is another idea for homebrewing. There's different ways in Poke D&D to choose your starters. There's a lot of different ways on how to choose them.
Yeah.
You could do the traditional, if you want to just do the Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, Eevee, Pikachu, that's fine. If you want to do that for your players, have that cool aspect, or starters of a region, you could do that, right?
Absolutely.
You could roll for specific types based on a list. So if you lay out all the types, right? If you lay out like an avatar lock, exactly. You lay out all the types and you have them roll and say, okay, your guy can only catch poison and flying types or something. So your starter, so as DM, you could suggest like 3 different mons that are either poison or flying, etc. And that could be a cool character concept where you can only catch flying or poison type mons,
Yeah.
Another
great role play tool.
Yeah, it is, especially if your guy's like, I grown up with the water my whole life, and it's like I can only do water and grass or water and ground type mons, know?
I'm gonna become this type gym leader. Boom.
Like that's your character arc. Like your character arc could literally be you want to be the gym leader or somebody important in the region that specializes in certain types and is known for that. And then that lets DM know, okay, on certain routes I can try to sprinkle these in to help you later on if you find them, if it's a rolled or planned,
Absolutely. What So, do you want to describe what we did for
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah, we can
campaign?
get into that. Yeah. So what we did was I took a list of 100 mons that could be your starter. And I had them all roll off camera and things for their 3 mons to choose from to be their starter, and then they based that around their backstories and whatnot. So, for example, give me 3 D100s, Ty, and I could tell you what your mons would be if you had to choose again.
Okay. I
And
remember my options before, and they were good.
do
It
you
was a
remember
hard
your
decision.
options? All I remember is
I
now Pepity.
I I do. So it was Peppy the Piplup. It was a Vulpix, which I was real close between the two. And then the third one was a Krogunk. So,
Oh,
you
really?
know, yeah, it's
Geez,
interesting stuff.
And
But
the book just say like a trainer must begin with any single unevolved Pokemon of species rating SR half or lower, with the base stats in a stat block. So
yeah, my rolls were 24.
okay, so you got 24.
Yep,
Nummel
89
89, which was Snivy,
and 58.
and a 58 being an Eevee. So those
Yeah,
are 3 not too bad options.
right, exactly. And it's again that randomness, but you still kind of get the sense of I chose this.
And like I said, I took the list of SR 8, SR half, SR quarter, put them all together, and cut out what I thought would be the best 100 options for my players. Right? And with this being a specific, like a sea watery campaign, first things I tried to cut was like the Pokemon you could fish up. Because obviously, if it's like an ocean region, they're going to run into water Pokemon more often than not, just
Right,
exploring around. So, with that aspect, I try my best to cut out water things you could fish up or encounter frequently. I feel like that these starters are more rare. And that's where you, as a DM, depending on what your campaign's about, you could do that change. You know, like if it's like a deserty wasteland campaign you're doing, like maybe like a nuclear explosion went off, and these are people coming out of like a survival area. A lot of the Pokemon out might be poison or ground types that they'll see more dominantly than not. So you'll tend to not put Ekans or Geodude as like a starter option because they might run into that more often than not, or Cubone or something, right? Like we talked about earlier.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
homebrew again.
homebrew, yeah. And if there's players that are like on the fence about it, and they're just like, I really want to play this. Like I, it's my favorite mon I want to play with. Then if that's your choice to let them do that, then you could let them choose their own from the list in the back of the book, right? Like if that's what you want to do, that's okay. Because ultimately, if that helps them shape their backstory more to being able to have a Pokemon that they want to include, then I would say let them. If that's what they want to do, and if you're okay with that as a DM, like the
For
book,
sure.
the book says just let them pick. So it's up to whatever you're feeling. Do you want to let them pick? You could, or do you make your own custom list of 100 based on your campaign, or even if it's just a list of 20 to choose from. If it's just all the like starters from the regions put together.
Yeah, think about what would the professor of that region most likely have in his possession for these starting players, just like Professor Oak. He had caught those three and caught a Pikachu and was like, "Here you go.
These are your
That's all I got."
choices. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You know. And in that way too, especially if it's a mon, and this is where it's kind of cool too. If you don't have them roll on like 100 table, right, and if it's like a Bulbasaur, Charmander, Eevee, Pikachu lineup, those Pokemon, if you choose to do the table kind of adventure idea versus just the planned encounters, those could be towards the top end or rarer things to encounter on a route, right? Because in games, there's that small chance you can encounter a starter in a random route. Like in some
For
games,
sure.
they have that. Like you can find other starters in the game. It's just an incredibly hard thing to do. If you want to base that on your world, you could too. If you want to make it so that those starters are like the equivalents of Weedles and Starlies, you could do that too. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of different ways in Pokemon D&D to homebrew things.
Absolutely.
And as long as your players are on board with you for doing it, don't be afraid to suggest. If you're a DM and you're like new, don't be afraid to suggest ideas to your players and get feedback. Because ultimately, you play the role as God. Like I've learned that so many times where I want to interact with my players and I want to tell them something that they missed, but I know I can't because I'm God. And it's up to the players to know, as players, did we miss something? Like what happened? What was important? You
For
know,
sure. Take notes.
take notes. And one of the last things we'll talk about for D&D Pokemon here, homebrew ideas for improvements. Example, if you have a region, you can homebrew your own race for people.
Yes, we did do that.
Like, Tyler, you're playing as an Ormean, a native person here in Ormia. If you want to go into some of the details of being an Ormean that I put on the list there.
Absolutely, because it's just one of those key features that can really flesh out your character, and especially with Gregory being a swimmer, it it really ties into him. So the race, this is the description. You grew up in the oceanic region and learned the ways of sailing off the coast. From your experience of living by the sea and the numerous boats you've been on, when it comes to sea travel, no other race is better than you. So it gives you a feature, the sense of travel. Your natural sense of adventure gives you +2 to nature and perception. So having those skill bonuses really come in handy. I know Gregory has used, I mean, everybody uses perception a lot, and you can agree to that, I'm sure.
Oh yes, that's one of, if not the most common role in D&D, next to like persuasion.
Persuasion and yeah, exactly. Another feature is boat rider. You're proficient with sea vessels, so you can add proficiency bonus to checks made involving controlling sea vehicles. We're about to, at some point, going to be on a boat for the majority of this campaign, most likely. So I think that might potentially be very handy. Um, and then inner fisherman. This I know Gregory uses a lot with his family, having um, been fishermen. Having grown up with fishing, when you attempt to catch anything you've reeled in from a fishing rod, you gain +3 to attempt to catch it, and it's automatically starts him off with an old rod, 2 Weedle, and a Venonat piece of bait, which
Yes.
is huge because that's a lot of money.
Yes, and as you'll see more of this adventure, you'll learn more about the whole different baits, and you're kind of like Weedle and Venonat bait. What's that? You'll learn about like different things that I've at least homebrewed for this Pokemon region that I thought would be an awesome way for fishing, right? Is to like use different baits to attract different or more rare mons that are attracted to more delicate food, whatnot. And that can kind of be seen in the real world in a way, like you use different bait when you go deep sea fishing versus fishing off like a beach, you know
Absolutely.
fly fishing versus other things, and that's where it adds a fun thing for players, right?
Yeah, adds a little realism to it as well.
And then there's like another link here that's provided that I will also put in the link down below to Pokemon player races, right? And this is something that we saw that other players are in our campaign. Like there's Alolan, there's Hoennian,
Each region has one.
Johto, right? Like I think
Cantonese.
Katie's character is Johto, by doing practice ceremonies and things. The Kantoian is another one. Sinnoian. So they base them off like the games, right? So if your region has its own type of people, that could be something you could dabble into homebrewing. And I know like this is like a lot of stuff, and you're like, oh, this is a lot of stuff he's telling me. And these are just ideas. You could use all of them. You could use none of them. You could use some of them. Any way to help make your playstyle better, or for you and for the players to come over after, to be able to help spread the word of how good D&D is and fun for people to play.
Yeah, and the thing I love about D&D is that whenever each time you play, it is never the same thing.
Yep.
Never the same situation, never the same outcome. And homebrew is just another way of many to supplement that.
And I can say I've made a story that I've had people be playing now for well over a year that I've done with two groups of people. The same exact story, just as me as DM to see how they handle things differently. And I can tell you, it is crazy how things are handled differently in two different groups. You know, one group might be stealthy about going in an approach, and another group might go in guns a-blazing. And while that might alter the story in some way, I as DM get to see and react to different ways of how I'm telling my story. So if one group doesn't do something and I'm like, oh, that's crazy, you know, I can then alter that or tweak it a little bit for the other group. And by having the option of being able to have two different groups playing the same adventure, quote unquote, that I've homebrewed, I can adjust things for future if I want to reuse that. Like I have this one shot that I use all the time for players that I've introduced new people to D&D with, and I've had veterans play that one shot where I just changed the creatures in it, you know? And that's what makes D&D great, because it's like, yes, it's the same story, but you can alter it and twist it. So it's never, like, it's the same quote unquote story, but it's not going to be the same story, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that about wraps up this DM direction.
Of going into just homebrew advice and tips and things. And if you guys in the comments have suggestions on how that you've homebrewed different things for players, we'd love to hear from you down below. If you want to comment or go on the Discord and let us know of different ideas that you've heard of, thought of, done with your play group, that even if you want to ask us, hey, you think this idea is good or you think that's too crazy, let us know. And we have some good experience under our belts for having played this now for quite a few years. So we could let you know if that idea sounds like a good thing or if that's crazy, or even how to alter it to make it even better, you know?
Yeah, let us know your experiences, your ideas, because we might even use some of them.
That's true.
You know, that's what we'll have polls for. That's what we'll have Q&A for. Want to hear your feedback. With that, remember, DM told me to
never be afraid to homebrew things.